Hey everybody, it's the Commodore from the Clan of the Grey Wolf, and you are watching the weekly Wringer series here on clanofthegreywolf.com. Great and glad to be back with you again for another week and another episode of the Weekly Wringer. Lots to talk about today. Got to reflect on the question from last week, which was about MMOs and specifically their place in the past, present, and future of online gaming. And really gaming in general, which I think is a great topic, one that we could take several weeks to really break apart and look at, but that's not at all in the spirit of the Weekly Wringer, where we keep things pretty fast-paced and we move things quite along. We'll move to a question for next week once I share my own thoughts about that particular question. I'll ask you a question for next week which really centers and focuses around consoles specifically. So those of you that might have felt a little bit left out by the fact that we talked about MMOs, and let's face it, for better or for worse at this particular moment in time, that's dominated by PC. It's time to go and start to look at something a little bit more console-centric. So we're going to do that this week as well. So let's kick things right off. I always begin by welcoming folks to the community. It's a big part of what we do. Many of you said it's a big part of what makes MMOs so wonderful as well. Those of you that said they were wonderful. I happen to think it's partly the best thing about the Weekly Wringer, and those of you that said it's probably the best thing about MMOs, I don't think I can disagree with that either. And I understand the driving desire behind people that make these games to create really compelling, cooperative, and communicative experiences, because that's the same desire I had in starting the Weekly Wringer. So, new this week, we've got Siobhan Lord, which I thought was a cool name. I think that's pretty neat. Welcome to you, Siobhan Lord. Secondly, also, Wrath of Seven. Mysterious and cool. I like it. Welcome to Wrath of Seven as well. And also, Pyros, or Pyros, however you want to say that. I'm not really sure. In any case, welcome to all three of you. It's great to have you a part of the Weekly Wringer. Hope to see you back here many, many times in the future, commenting on any of the things that we like to talk about here, which are many. And in case I don't appreciate those of you that comment every single week, great to have you guys. Another thing is, a lot of you send me messages, quite a bit, and you don't hear back from me immediately. It's not because I don't love you guys. I really, really do. It's just that my job eats my life up a lot of the times, and you guys know how that is. So if I don't get back to you right away, it's not because I haven't read or considered your questions, or / even written some of the questions down to be used in future Weekly Ringers. So if you want to send me messages with Weekly Ringers, some of you have suggested them. I put them in the pile of questions I have as a stock, and really appreciate any kind of input you guys might have on what kind of questions you'd like to see us treat in the future. There are a lot of great questions to be asked out there, and we haven't even broken the surface of all the stuff that we can talk about that has to do with gaming, technology, nostalgia, the history of video games, the future of video games, the future of technology. We've really asked about it all, and I'm really glad to be a part of that. All right, so now let's get into the question that I asked you from last week. Now, if you recall, I asked the question about whether MMOs, and I left it specific to MMOs instead of saying MMO genre, right? But are MMOs a part of the history or the future of gaming? And, when I asked the question, I thought it was really deep and provocative. I thought, it's a great idea. I'll make them choose. After a while, and seeing some of the responses that came from the question, I started to feel a little bit bad about the question, just because many of you said, quite rightly, that it's a little bit of a false dichotomy, right? For better or for worse, MMOs are part of the history of gaming, and they're part of the future of online gaming to some extent, and they're quite obviously part of the present as well. So it kind of created this weird false dichotomy, which is exactly what I was trying to do, but I should have kind of said something along the lines of, if you had to pick, which one would you pick? If you had to hedge your bets that the moment of MMOs had come and gone, or the moment of MMOs is yet to come, is kind of what I was looking at. It's okay. Many of you actually went there anyway, even though I guess I didn't ask the question, I guess, exactly how I was expecting to. Totally cool. Even those of you that didn't ask or answer anything about that particular question and went into something completely different, I really loved the input as well. So I have a lot to talk about, which is why we've got a lot to get through today. So let me start with this. Mr. K talked about the idea of the WoW killer. And I think this is a great place to start. So let's talk about MMO RPGs, right? I think if any of us are being honest, the first thing we think about when we hear MMO, for a good reason, is two MMO RPGs, right? They are the kind of quintessential, massively multiplayer online game. And, thousands upon even millions of subscribers that could be playing at exactly the same time. All on servers spread out all across the world and all being part of this unique, very powerful gaming experience. So, WoW really becomes the defining moment for MMORPGs. I think the first time I remember hearing about World of Warcraft was way back in like 2001 or 2002. And just thought, man, this is a really awesome idea. Of course, a huge fan that I am of the Warcraft franchise. And I played all the games that had been released at that point. And I wasn't into StarCraft, but definitely was into Warcraft. And loved it and thought, wow, this is a really interesting idea. EverQuest, of course, was very popular at the time. And the idea of taking something like EverQuest and putting it into the world of Warcraft, bear with me now, was a pretty cool idea. So Mr. K's point, and it took off, it obviously lit on fire. It debuted, I believe, in 2004. So believe it or not, folks, WoW has been around for 8 years and counting. And by the way, it's not getting any less popular. It's only, they might be a little stagnating a little bit in terms of their numbers, but it's still one of the most popular games in the world. Anyway, the point Mr. K is trying to make is that every MMO that's come out since World of Warcraft has really tried to market itself and tried to, and I don't mean to establish agency to something that's an inanimate object, is the people behind it have tried to market it, at least, as the WoW killers. The game that's finally going to end the tyrannical reign of the great and powerful WoW. And as Mr. K rightly dictates to us, that has not happened. That's never come to pass. World of Warcraft is still the king of the hill, at least in most of the gaming population in the Western world. In places like Korea and China, where MMORPGs are a way of life. They are not just kind of pastimes for folks' gaming habits. They are a way of life. Things are a little bit different. Although games like WoW are absolutely still immensely popular, it's impossible to fully grasp the scope of their subscriber numbers, but they're massive. In any case, the fact that no game has been able to unseat World of Warcraft might indicate a lot of things. Now for Mr. K, I think his point is absolutely well taken, and I think it's a very good one. That these games have really failed to live up to the immenseness of WoW. But Mr. K gives a way out. Well, you know what, guys? I think if you tried to do something different, if you weren't trying to be a WoW killer, you might actually have something on your hands. Interesting thought. As being a part of the Future of Online Gaming panel at PAX, I think there are many people that think just like you, Mr. K, and there are people that are making games that are going to debut very soon. So I think in fact, that question came up explicitly. Why are you guys trying to make WoW clones? And everyone, including Kurt Schilling, which is the basis of the question, me even asking the question to begin with, said, no one's going to kill WoW. We've given that up. That was something that we thought about a long time ago, but now no one's thinking along those lines. It's about creating an experience that's fun and engaging. And I think that was something that swept over the great amount of folks that were there to talk on the panel about online gaming is, listen, it's not about killing WoW. It's about having fun. If we can create a fun premise that people like to do and like to play, then there you go. You're going to have a novel concept, and if it's popular enough and if it takes off enough, then maybe you'll kill WoW, but we're not out to do that. We're out to be, there's plenty of market left for us to take. Let's go take it. So, a great place to start. I want to say thanks for Mr. K. One thing I want to say about this, though, is let's say that World of Warcraft, let's take Mr. K's premise and kind of throw it out, that maybe if we do something different, it'll all work out. Let's take it as premise that WoW is the best of the best. At that moment, I'm kind of thinking that the best moment for MMO RPGs, at least, is in the past, not in the future. I think an argument can be made there for that. If WoW, is the best, then wouldn't you have to argue that MMOs are kind of more part of the history of video gaming than they're going to be a part of the future? But the fact is that MMOs don't end with RPGs, and many of you get into that, which is why I kind of stopped myself when I was asking the question, as you saw from the video last week. And I want to get into that, but I'm gonna hold my tongue on it and not spoil the rest of the video. Sandcoffin69 is banking on MMOs being more part of the future than of the past, but they're not very excited about that premise. And the reason why is because, very similar to myself, Sandcoffin69 is absolutely engrossed and immersed by single-player experiences that are very, very good. And I have to say, this arises from a history of playing really damn good single-player games, like the Final Fantasy games of old, like Chrono Cross, and something in the golden age of JRPGs in America, being the Super Nintendo and into the PS1 generation, where JRPGs just dominated. They were the biggest force in gaming, especially in RPGs, before the American and Western RPGs really came to prominence. If you grew up with those games, I think you have a special place in your heart for the magical, single-player, immersive experience. I feel this way all the time, which is one of the reasons why I really don't like MMOs, MMORPGs, let's say. I don't like MMORPGs because they don't have that same kind of feel. And I will give you folks a case in point with WoW. With WoW, and then juxtapose that to something like Skyrim. Skyrim to me is a symphony of what a single-player experience can look like. Is it without its faults? Absolutely not. Are there things that could get better? You betcha there are. And, I could sit down right now, play for an hour, and make a list. But let me tell you, what it does damn well. And what they could do moving forward in terms of the power of systems and the capabilities to reproduce entire worlds is only going to get better. So my thought is that just dominates. But the idea of the future being dominated by MMORPGs is daunting for me, The fact of the matter is, the people that make Skyrim are not making as much money as the people that make World of Warcraft, right? They're just not. Now, World of Warcraft is a premise that's very, very old, but is working very, very well. Skyrim is a game that sold extremely well for something of its genre. But even so, even though it's multiple platform and all that kind of stuff, they're not making nearly as much money as Blizzard is with WoW. Interesting thought, right? Very interesting thought. So, remember that gaming is a market, and, companies go where the money is. Well, the money clearly seems to be in MMOs, and a lot of companies are banking on that. And, by the way, don't tell Kurt Schilling that. But I think many of you, and I think Mr. K made this point as well, the hardest market to break into in online gaming, of all stripes, is breaking into MMOs. There is such a significant requirement in terms of forward capital to get into MMOs. It's almost like launching a console. It's just damn near impossible in this market environment. It's very, very difficult to do. And people do it, but it takes a ton of balls and it takes a ton of money. And if you don't have either one of those, or you don't have both of them in droves, then I think you're not going to do very well. And as 38 Studios is learning right now, if you have a ton of balls and you don't have a lot of money, then you're not going to be able to make a very good MMO. And as they're finding out, you can't even complete an MMO. So, and this is not a commentary on 38. Maybe I'll do a separate blog entry about that, which I think is an interesting tale and deserves comment. Estolia talked about MMOs not being the future, not being the future.